Huh?
Into water bottles.
Okay. I don't see any more. Nico, this is my second match on. What? My second match on. I don't know what you're trying to get at. Come on. All these kids are rushing me, and they still die. Like, don't rush. Like, come on. I gotta do it. No, I don't want it. Yep. Take it. Hold that. Hold it. Try it.
Every goddamn thing for his own.
I know. He's probably camping on top. He's probably camping on top. Because I ran. Whole time I was in the trash can, I was slow. And he didn't know I left. That is a good. I'm gonna blame you too. Thanks for doing it. So happy. I'm through. Anything that be Rick Rock up come through. You got your car? You don't keep doing nothing more than hit your girl and she was lost. I need to get back there too, but if you do somebody on the way, if you do somebody and I took all your just as funny. I just saw your honey. Damn, it was like in the house. It was like in the back. I saw you going through this man named Justice Ross. I missed him. You were playing to get yesterday, but I don't even care, but I got it. Anything happens, anything goes, anything comes out, anything goes. Damn. Yo. Oh. You can't scare someone like that. You can't die. Seems like I saw him crash. I was like, come on. And this is the AI. He's shooting my wall. You can't scare someone like that. I want to try to hurt them. Bad. Definitely. Love it. Hit all those hit markers for no reason. What the heck? Flip. Sparkling or still sailing? I don't know which one am I in? Drop the puck, let it fly. I know that's too soon. I wait shuffle from the back. Hit you fucking there. Think that I'm playing around. I be so bad you won't make a sound. You think that you're playing to make you cute, but I be so bad that I'll turn you a brute. Don't play with me. I haven't seen this for a while. What time did you wake up today?
Get up and stick out of the way.
The what?
Get up, take that stick out of the way.
Oh.
This is the tale of the Lady of White Rock Lake. And pushed. See, they knew that no matter the disappearances. Back when I was still in the 8th grade, I witnessed one of the worst things in my life. Before class, my best friend Sarah would meet me at my locker, and we'd gossip and chat until first period, which we had together. And I remember this particular morning, she came up to my locker like usual, but she didn't seem like herself. I asked her if something was bothering her, but she didn't say much. She just sort of stared. I told her that if she wasn't feeling well, she should probably go home. Then the bell rang, and I began walking towards the direction of our first class. But she didn't follow me. I didn't want to be late, so I left without her. When I got to class, I told my teacher, Mr. Tamer, that Sarah wasn't feeling well and should probably go home. Sarah was his daughter. He thanked me for telling him, and just as he was about to leave the room to check on her, a booming voice came on the school intercom. Code black. I repeat, code black. We were used to lockdown drills. We had them throughout the school year, so everyone just thought it was one of those drills. And so Mr. Tamer locked our doors, and we all sat quietly in our seats. But all I could think about was Sarah. I hoped it really was just a drill, and that she wasn't alone out there, in danger. Then the voice crackled again through the speakers. All of the religion teachers, please come to the office immediately. Mr. Tamer was one of them, and so he left without a word. In all of our previous drills, they'd never asked for the religious teachers before. I remember thinking it was very curious. About an hour had passed before the lockdown ended. It was definitely one of the longest ones we had. The voice on the intercom told us we were safe to move to our next period. We were all so tense and curious to find out what was going on. I remember leaving my classroom and seeing the other students pointing towards the windows. I followed their gestures and saw strange red smears on the glass. They almost looked like handprints, like someone was banging on the windows. But it didn't make sense. How could there be blood stains on every upstairs window in the building? It was so odd. The next day at school, Sarah wasn't there. I figured she probably still didn't feel well and was staying home to rest. But when I went to first period, we had a substitute teacher. Mr. Tamer didn't show up to school either. I decided that I was going to play hooky and check in on my friend. I snuck off campus and headed towards Sarah's house. When I got to the door, I rang the bell, but nobody answered. There were cars in the driveway, so I knew people were home. I rang again, still nothing. I knew Sarah's bedroom was on the ground level to the left, so I decided to go up to her window to see if I could get her attention. As I approached the window, I heard lots of shouting and loud noises. I pressed my face to the glass and saw Sarah kicking and screaming as her father shook her by the neck. I gasped loudly, and he turned his head towards me. I ran around the house and through the front door. When I opened Sarah's bedroom door, she was no longer in her father's grasp. She was on the bed, motionless. Her father was crying over her body. I knelt down next to him and cried with him. He explained that one of the teachers had found Sarah banging her head on the windows at school and smearing the blood in her hands. Sarah said she had to because the jinn inside of her wanted to eat her blood. When the teacher tried to help smearing the blood with her hands, Sarah said she had to because the jinn inside of her wanted to eat her blood. When the teacher tried to help her, she saw the blank, empty look in Sarah's eyes, and she knew she was far gone. I have been up all night and day praying and trying to save her, but I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't supposed to go this far. This wasn't supposed to happen. Mr. Tamer continued through his tears. But at least now, she is at peace. So please, please. Once there were two young sisters, Annie and Belle. They lived in a small house in the country with their kind and gentle mother. They loved to explore and play in the fields surrounding their home. One day, the sisters came across another young girl, playing by herself in the road. She was beating on a very curiously designed drum. And as she played, a little mechanical man and woman came out of the other end and danced. The girls were mesmerized by the unique toy and begged the stranger to give it to them, who looked back at them and laughed. "This is a very special toy," the little girl said. "If I were to give it away, it would have to be in exchange for something big." "Well, what do you want for it?" Annie asked. "You have to go back home and be very bad. Come back tomorrow and tell me all the bad things you did, and then I might give you my toy. Deal?" Deal. The sisters agreed and headed back to their house. "What if we just told her we did bad things?" Annie suggested. "It's not like she'd know anyway, right?" So the next day, the sisters went back to the spot in the road where they met the girl the other day. "We were very bad," Belle lied. "Yeah," Annie chimed in. "We wrote all over our walls, we threw our supper on the floor, and we screamed all night. Now can we have the drum?" "Not so fast," the girl said. "I know that you're lying to me. Come back tomorrow and bring proof that you were very, very bad, and then I'll give you my toy. Deal?" Deal. The sisters agreed again and walked away, annoyed, while the girl giggled at them. By the time they got back home, their mother was still away at work. They decided to be very bad before she got home so that they could clean up and explain everything to her. They tore up pillows and mutilated their stuffed animals. They smashed their mother's favorite vase and gathered the pieces. Surely this would be enough for the little girl to give them the drum, they thought. They took the torn up pillows and pieces of vase and brought it to the girl. "We made a horrible mess," Annie said proudly. We even broke our mother's favorite expensive vase. Now can we have the drum? The little girl rolled her eyes. You both clearly don't know what bad is. You should just go back home. She turned her back towards the sisters and continued playing with her drum. Just tell us what we should do, Annie shouted. The girl slowly turned back around. She reached inside her drum and pulled out a small glass vial and a blade. Bring me your mother's blood. Oh, let's get out of here, sister, Annie said. That toy is not worth all this trouble. As they turned to leave, the little girl called after them, her voice much deeper than it was before.
Once you've made a pact, you cannot turn back. I will be taking something of yours.
The sisters picked up their pace and sprinted all the way back home. They called for their mother, but she wasn't there. In fact, nothing was in their home. No furniture, no room. Just a big, open, cavernous wooden space and one door leading outside. And then, the walls began to resonate. The roof was vibrating in a familiar rhythm. The sisters ran out the door, only to find their movements stiffen. Their bodies had become rigid and wooden as they moved their limbs involuntarily to the beat. Above them, the little girl, not so little anymore, beating on the drum. Want to hear something scary? A long time ago, I went to an antique store with my dad. We had just finished lunch nearby and wanted to poke around at the local shops. There were a lot of really interesting items, vintage furniture and old paintings, but I was immediately drawn to the section where all the dolls were. I love dolls, especially the porcelain ones that closed their eyes when you laid them down to sleep. I picked one up and was admiring her golden-hued irises when I heard a voice call out to me. It was an old lady sitting behind the counter. I assumed she was the owner. "Do you like dolls, little lady?" she croaked, her voice coarse and dry. I nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, I do." She motioned for me to come over to the counter. "That's a very special doll," she continued. "Her name is Savannah. She was mine when I was a young girl, just like you." The old lady continued to ask me questions about my life, my interests, my hobbies, my goals in life. I was used to older people being friendly and inquisitive, so I didn't mind at all. "I just love children," the lady said. "So full of life, so much potential. Not like me. My sight's not what it used to be. Enjoy every moment of your youth, dear." My dad joined me at the counter, but when I showed him Savannah, he told me he wasn't going to buy me yet another doll, then headed back outside. Dejected, I placed the doll back on the counter when the old lady handed it back to me and winked. I hadn't really noticed how white her eyes were before. I thanked her and left the store. Savannah was my new favorite doll. Even though she was from an antique shop, she was in very good condition. I loved twirling her soft blonde ringlets of hair. Her dress had beautiful embroidered patterns that were extremely fun to run my fingers over. She was the latest addition to my afternoon pretend tea parties, where I'd prop up my dolls in a circle, along with my baby sister, Lexi. I was sipping make-believe tea and gabbing about my imaginary travels all over the world. But I noticed that Lexi was upset. She was usually a happy, quiet baby, but she was frowning and whimpering. "Doll," she mumbled. I grabbed one of my older dolls and waved it in front of her, but it didn't seem to cheer her up. I thought maybe Savannah might be able to calm her down, so I grabbed her and brought her close. But that's when Lexi began screaming. I dropped Savannah and picked up my baby sister. I bounced her up and down in my arms, trying to calm her down. Once she'd stopped crying, I set her back down on the floor near Savannah, who was laying on her back, eyes closed shut. Over the next few days, Lexi continued to act up like this, but only when Savannah was around. I didn't want to admit it at the time, but Savannah was also starting to make me feel uneasy too. Her eyes, even though they were yellow, felt so real, so lifelike. I decided to put Savannah away in my closet. The next day, there was a knock on the door. I was in my room playing with my sister, and I heard my dad answer. Then I heard his voice get louder and more angry. I went over to see what was going on. Right outside the door was the old lady from the antique shop. How did she know where we lived? Why was she here? My dad turned to me. "Did you steal that doll?" he said accusingly. "She gave it to me," I replied defensively.
Don't worry, I'm not here to take her back,
the old lady explained.
I just wanted to see if you were enjoying her. Are you still playing with her?
I was quiet for a few moments. I didn't want to tell her that the doll actually creeped me out now and it was stuffed behind my clothes. So I lied. I love it.
It isn't polite to lie,
The old lady screeched. It caught me and my dad off guard.
You better take her out of that closet, or I'll make you regret not appreciating your youth.
At this point, my dad basically shoved her off our front steps and slammed the door. I had no idea what had just happened. What was so special about that doll? I went back to my room and dug Savannah out of my closet. I looked deep into her yellow eyes, those hyper-realistic eyes. And then it hit me. I felt incredibly nauseous. I had brought Savannah with me everywhere. She'd slept in bed with me. She sat on the sink while I showered. She saw everything. The old lady saw everything. I knew what I had to do. I held Savannah high in the air and smashed her on the ground. Her face shattered all over the floor. Right away, I rammed my shoe on top of each of them until they were no more than tiny bits. A wave of relief washed over me. I went to go celebrate my small victory with Lexi. I grabbed her under the arms and hoisted her up in the air, swinging her gently and smiling cheerily at her. I didn't put her down until I noticed her yellow-colored eyes. About a year ago, me and my family took a vacation to America. We stayed in this fancy, upscale hotel. We checked in and got our key to our room on the 5th floor. Every night, I'd go down to the lobby after dinner and read a book or watch a movie with my headphones and have little chats with the receptionist, Tom. One night, I was in the lobby reading, and my mom texted me asking when I was going to come back up to the room. I looked at the time and quickly realized it was already 11 p.m. So I went back to my room and stayed up for a bit. After half an hour or so, I realized that I'd left my purse in the lobby. My dad and I kept trying to call Tom at reception via our hotel phone to see if he'd seen it or if it was still there. No answer. After about 10 minutes of trying, I finally decided to head back down. As I got into the elevator, I saw this shy-looking girl, my age, like 16 years old. She was wearing a really cute sweater with a triangle design on it. "I love your outfit," I said. No reply. "My name's Marissa. What's yours?" She just ignored me and hit the button for the first floor. I thought maybe I somehow offended her, or... It hit me. She might have been deaf or mute or had special needs. Then the elevator proceeded to go up to the 10th floor. "That's odd," I said. I looked over at the girl, now looking down at the floor of the lift, quite nervously. I quickly apologized for whatever I'd done. Maybe I was offending her by repeatedly speaking to her, I don't know. But when I'm uncomfortable, I get kind of sad. We arrived on the 10th floor. As the doors opened, the dark empty hallway came back at us. I assumed that she would hit the first floor button again, but she didn't. So I leaned over and tested myself. Just as I did that, she was stepping forward. She ran into my arm for a moment and stepped back. After I pulled my arm away, she stepped out of the elevator and into the hallway. Confused, I called out to her, "Where are you going? I thought you were going to the first floor." soon as I said that, she bolted. I shrugged it off and hit the lobby button. I got to reception and asked Tom if he'd seen my purse. Luckily he had, and he handed it over to me. You could have just called. I would have been happy to send someone up to bring it to you, Tom said. I actually did try calling from my room about half an hour ago, I explained, but I couldn't get through. I figured the line was busy or something. No, my line was definitely open. I'll have to look into that, Tom said. Before I turned around to head back to the elevator, I asked Tom if there were any deaf or special needs guests at the hotel. I told him about the girl in the elevator and how I might have scared or offended her. He told me he wasn't sure, and even if he did know, it wasn't information he should be sharing. I understood and headed to my room. The next day, me and my family were going out for the day for some tourist activities. I waved at Tom as we passed reception, and then he waved for me to come over. That girl you mentioned last night, what did she look like? He asked. She was like 16, probably. She was wearing this really cute sweater with triangles. Tom looked incredibly worried. She never returned to her room last night. Her parents called this morning looking for her. My heart sank. That poor girl. She was seen pressing random buttons in the elevator on the CCTV. Tom continued. That sounded familiar to me. I remembered seeing a video like that. Back in 2013, I think. Tom showed me the security footage, and sure enough, there she was, looking nervous, pressing random buttons, then me entering on the 5th floor, then her leaving on the 10th. That night, I Googled the elevator game, and I skimmed the rules. When you reach the 5th floor, a young woman may enter the elevator. Do not look at her. Do not speak to her. She is not what she seems. So that's why she was ignoring me. I was part of the game. Her game. But I wasn't a monster, I was just a person. Right? Am I not what I seem? Am I dangerous? It's been almost a year since that day. She still hasn't been found. They say if you play the elevator game successfully, you can travel to an alternate dimension on the 10th floor. But if you don't follow the rules exactly, you might get stuck there forever. And every now and then, I wonder if my being there interfered with her ritual somehow. I wonder if I'm the reason she's stuck. Pastel and Greg were a happy young couple in love. One of their passions was traveling. They loved to gaze upon the natural beauty of the world. It was how they felt closer to God. Their favorite spot to visit was Mines View Park, a cliff with a spectacular view. That's where Greg met Pastel and where they held their simple wedding ceremony. Not too long after, Pastel became pregnant with their first child. Pastel and Greg, being a very good-looking couple themselves, were constantly showered with assurance from their friends and family that their baby would, too, be beautiful. In the months leading up to their baby's birth, they prepared the nursery, bought many toys and clothes, and spared no expense. They had traveled all over the world to see God's beautiful creation, but they knew nothing would be more beautiful than the new life they would soon be blessed with. They were ready to see God in their new child. The day finally came. Pastel had chosen to give birth naturally in their home, in a tub. She was in labor for quite a while, and Greg was starting to become concerned. But the midwife assured them that everything was fine. After many tiring hours, their baby was born. Congratulations, you have a healthy little girl. The couple smiled down at their little miracle, but only for a fleeting moment. The baby's eyes were large and uneven, almost bulging out of her skull. One of her ears was folded over entirely. One of her arms was shorter than the other. Is she okay? Pastel asked the midwife. Oh, yes. She's a very healthy young girl. Despite these minor abnormalities, she will live a long, happy life. Congratulations again. You are so lucky. What are you naming her? The couple didn't answer. Later that night, neither one of them could sleep. They just sat in bed, their thoughts racing through their minds. Their unnamed baby, however, was sleeping peacefully in her crib. Pastel turned to Greg. "That's not our baby," she said coldly. "I don't see God in that child. I see the devil." Early the next morning, Pastel and Greg decided to visit Lions View Park, thinking it would raise their moods. Pastel carried the baby in her arms as they approached the edge of the cliff and looked out over the valley. The sun was just barely rising. It was still early enough that no one else was at the park. Pastel took a step towards the edge, and another, and let her arms drop. Greg rubbed her back comfortingly. "We'll try again, honey." A month or so later, Pastel became pregnant again. Every day leading up to her due date, they prayed to God that their baby would be born differently than last time. And she was. Pastel gave birth to a healthy baby girl whose features were a seamless blend of her parents. She was perfect to Pastel and Greg in every way. They decided to name her Angela. On Angela's 4th birthday, they took her to their favorite park so they could show her their special place by the cliff, and that way it could be their special place as a family. But when they entered the gate, Angela began to cry.
I don't like this place.
She sobbed.
Can we go home?
"We just want to show you our favorite place Morning." Pastel tried to comfort her. "It's just right over there. You're going to love it." Angela was putting up a bit of a fight, and her parents were embarrassed by the scene they were causing. But they managed to get Angela to the cliff, and that's when she completely lost it.
Mommy, no, please don't hurt me, please.
At this point, everyone in the park was staring.
Please don't throw me over again, please. I'm pretty now. I came back pretty, so you love me. Don't you love me?
When I was around 17 years old, I had a friend named Fraser. He was a bit of a daredevil, always taking risks and doing stupid stunts. He had no regard for his own safety. One night, me, Fraser, and our friend Ashley were hanging out, and Fraser mentioned the House of Dune, a house that was about a half-mile from the outskirts of the village. Generally, our town wasn't that superstitious, but there was something about that place that scared all the locals. So, obviously, we all fell silent and then tried to steer clear of the subject. But this really annoyed Fraser. "I wish people would stop acting like the house is so dangerous," he said. The thing was, none of us had actually ever gone near the house. Everything we knew about it was from the stories our parents told us. We didn't know why we had to avoid it. We just knew that we should. And Fraser wasn't the type of guy to follow the rules. "Let's put an end to this stupid superstition and spend the night there, together, right now." Me and Ashley shared a worried glance, but Fraser was very insistent. So, without any real intention of spending the night, we decided to follow Fraser to the house. We thought we could maybe talk him out of it. So we pull up to the garden of the house, packed with our sleeping bags and flashlights. The garden was completely overgrown. Plants were wrapping around the gate, the tarmac, and the house. The windows were shattered. The house was giving off an energy that, to this day, I still can't describe accurately. Sitting in that car, looking up at the bleak, desolate building, it was enough to make me come to my senses. We decided that this was a really bad idea and we should head home. All of us except Fraser. "You're really going to let fear control your lives?" he taunted us. "Everyone is afraid of this house and doesn't even know why." After about a half-hour arguing, Fraser realized he wasn't going to convince us and let us spend the night in the car, while he spent the night in the house alone. Before he went inside, he told us that he planned on staying in the attic. Every 15 minutes or so, he would bang on the attic wall facing the front yard to give us a sign that he was still okay. Then, at 8 a.m., he would return to the car. We wished him luck and watched as he confidently strutted into the house. We waited. About 5 minutes went by until we heard a thud coming from the attic. We saw the faint silhouette of an arm waving at us in the window. Relieved to know that he was still okay, me and Ashley got comfy in the car. But there was no way we were going to fall asleep. And just like Fraser promised, every 15 minutes or so, we'd hear the reassuring thud. It was now about 1 a.m. Me and Ashley were finally comfortable enough to slowly fall asleep. I wasn't sure how long I had been knocked out, but I woke up to the same thud sound, only it was a little bit faster. No longer every 15 minutes, but more like every 5 seconds. I wasn't sure why Fraser was pounding more frequently now, but as long as he was okay, it didn't really matter. I fell back asleep. I didn't wake up until the morning sun shone on my face. Ashley had also just woken up. It was past 8 a.m. in the morning, but Fraser hadn't come back to the car yet. Fraser was still pounding on the attic wall. We figured he was just showing off now, trying to prove to us that he could stay even longer in the house. But we really wanted to head back home now, and we weren't just gonna wait for Fraser to be ready to come down. "Hey, Fraser!" I shouted up at the attic. "You proved your point. It's time to go home now."
I would have knew that's not true.
Ashley and I had no choice but to go get him ourselves. Although the house was still fairly creepy in the morning, we felt a little braver, knowing that Fraser made it through the night. So we entered the house. There were footprints in the dusty floor that showed us Fraser's path. We followed it up the deteriorating staircase into the attic, the thuds getting louder and louder as we got closer and closer. We opened the door. There was Fraser, hanging from the ceiling, his body swinging back and forth, and every 5 seconds, slamming into the wall. There once was a young girl named Imelda. Every day after school, she had to attend religious classes. But the only way there was to go through a thick forest. Neither the sun nor the moon could shine through the densely packed trees. And since no one else in her class lived in her neighborhood, she always had to walk there and back completely alone. The first couple of times was nerve-wracking, but after a few weeks, she had grown used to the darkness and had her way home memorized. One night after class, she was headed home on her usual path, guided by her flashlight. She heard a rustling behind her, but she ignored it. She had memorized all the sounds of the forest by now and knew it was just a stray cat that liked to roam in the area. She took another couple of steps before she heard a thump. That was a new sound. She stopped walking so that she could listen for the sound again. It sounded like it was getting closer. Imelda took a deep breath. She aimed her flashlight in the distance. The light beam fell on something, but she couldn't quite make out what it was since it was so far. It looked white, and, judging its size compared to the trees, tall. She continued to stare, trying to figure out what she was looking at. Then whatever it was, jumped, about 40 meters closer to her. Imelda took a few steps back. How did it jump so far so quickly? Then it jumped again. It was now right in front of her, and there was no longer any doubt in Imelda's mind what she was looking at. It was a decaying corpse, wrapped in a white shroud, bound at the top of its head, its neck, and its feet. Its withered, pale green face was the only thing exposed. It had 2 deep holes where eyes should have been. Imelda screamed and ran in the other direction. She knew the forest well and decided to take a different path back home to try and lose this figure following her. She squeezed her small frame through a very dense section of trees and crawled through the other side to her neighborhood. She looked behind her briefly to see if it was still behind her, but she couldn't see it. When she got to her house, she ran up to her mother. Mom, something was following me in the forest. It was wrapped in white and it looked dead. Her mother had an eager look on her face. Did you hug it? Imelda stared back at her mother in complete disbelief. Why would I do that? I never want to touch that thing. I don't want to see it ever again. Imelda burst into tears. You were lucky enough to see a pachong, her mother explained. In Muslim burials, a dead body is wrapped in a white shroud and tied at 3 spots, above the head, on the neck, and at the feet. After 40 days, the body is unwrapped so the soul can be freed. But if left untied, the body will look for a living person and won't stop following them until they're unwrapped. And if one is following you, her mother continued, with more excitement than Imelda was comfortable with, you must hug and hold it tight so it will bestow your family with good luck and riches. Don't you want us to be rich? I don't want to touch it, Mom. Something hit the door. Imelda, you have to open the door. She grabbed Imelda and held her in front of her while Imelda protested. Do this for us, sweetie. Her mom opened the door. There stood the pachong, looking down at Imelda's tear-filled face. Her mother pushed her forward and Imelda held onto the shrouded corpse. Then her mother helped her pull the pachong to the ground so they could untie it. They stared at the motionless corpse on the floor and wondered, did it work? Over the next few days, Imelda's mother was the most cheerful and giddy she'd ever been. She poured herself many cocktails in premature celebration of her incoming wealth. She drank a little too much one night and was struck dead on the road. Imelda was devastated by the loss of her mother, but her pain was eased when she was adopted by a very wealthy family.
Don't be greedy.
My name is Lawrence. I was 13 years old at the time. My mom and I were on a trip to my hometown in India, visiting some family. When we arrived, I went to take a shower and freshen up. I'm still not entirely sure how it happened, but I slipped and hit my rear end pretty hard on the floor. I remember my mom pounding on the locked door to let her in, while I lay there crying nonstop. After I calmed down a bit and let her in, I remember her examining the floor and being really confused. Because the floor was bone dry, I had slipped before I even stepped into the shower. That was just the beginning. Later that evening, my mom needed to run some errands and she left me alone in the house. I began to write in my diary about the trip so far. That's when I heard something grumble. It was my stomach, so I hopped out of bed to grab some snacks from the kitchen. I opened the door, and as I took a step forward, the door slammed back shut, hitting my head hard. I fell backward and onto the carpet. I screamed as I saw and felt blood dripping near my eyes. It hurt so bad. My vision was blurring, and I passed out. But before I did, I remember hearing a laugh that sounded like a woman's. I woke up. I felt terrible pain on my forehead, and I touched the area. It wasn't wet. There was no blood, no swelling, only pain. I was still on the ground. I looked around me. No blood. On the door, no blood there either. The door was still cracked halfway open, and I was still home alone. This type of thing kept happening to me. I would get inexplicably hurt, but ultimately end up fine. Like the next day, I was hit by a bus. Another day, a knife flew at me while I was alone in the kitchen. One time, I began choking out of nowhere. Every time something like this happened, I heard that same eerie laugh. The day before my 14th birthday, I decided to tell my mom. I had counted 8 times that I had nearly died, and I didn't want it to happen anymore. While I was explaining every incident to her, I could see the blood drain from her face. She grabbed my hand and pulled me outside, her other hand making calls on her cell phone. I remember feeling really scared. Did I do something wrong? short ride later, we arrived at a church. The rest of my family was already waiting there. They ushered me inside, and my grandma proceeded to tell me what was going on. So the story went that my Aunt Natasha became a teenage mother around the time my parents got married. She lived alone at the time, so no one knew about the baby. Unfortunately, she hated her baby girl, Lawrence. She hated her so much that she tried to kill her multiple times, slipping in the bathroom, slamming her head by the door, pushing her at a bus stop, throwing a knife at her, cutting her fingers, strangling her, poisoning her, throwing her out the balcony of the 5th floor, drilling her skull. Lawrence died on the 9th try. She died around the same time that I was born. The only reason my family knows about any of this is because when Aunt Natasha visited me for the first time and heard my name, Lawrence, she confessed everything. I was just 3 years old at the time. My family had her committed to an institution after that. So the priest at the church blessed me in hopes of removing the curse that Aunt Natasha had put on me. And it seems to have worked so far. It's been a year and I haven't had any more near-death experiences. I'm just glad that I told my parents about what was going on when I did. If I had waited any longer, things might have ended a lot differently. Want to hear something scary? When I was 14 years old, my friends and I were chatting at our usual spot before school. My friend Nicole started telling us about this one game she'd heard about called the Game of the Red Eye. If you follow all the instructions exactly, you would be able to undo one thing that has happened to you in your life. You can erase any moment that has caused you immense pain, and your life would continue as if it never happened, as long as you never told anyone that you played the game. Nicole continued to give us a detailed explanation of how to play. She really seemed convinced that it could be real. I've heard from multiple people that this really works, she tried to convince us. But how would you know? If it works, aren't you not allowed to say you did it? I argued. Nicole shrugged. I didn't want to admit it to my friends at the time, but I was definitely intrigued by this ritual, because there was something that I wanted to undo. My best friend, Amelie, had passed away about a month or so before. She used to hang out with us at our spot before school, and I definitely took the loss the hardest. So the thought of possibly getting to undo her death, why wouldn't I want to at least try? My parents were out of town that night, so I'd be home alone. That was the first step. Be in your home all by yourself. Then I had to summon the creatures of the dark. I turned off all the lights, lit enough candles so I could see my way, and walked around, politely asking them for their assistance. Once I heard low growls echoing around me, that's how I knew the game had started. Everything that happened from here on out was happening on a different plane of existence than reality. At least that's what the rules claimed. Next, I had to find my way to the nearest bathroom, stand in front of the mirror, and shut my eyes. Almost immediately, I heard a loud scream, crushed bones, and a little girl begging for help. I was not supposed to open my eyes no matter how tempting it was. Once all the sounds had stopped, I opened my eyes. Behind me, in the mirror, I saw a little girl with a red ribbon in her hair. She untied it and handed it to me. This was a key piece of the game, so I put it in my pocket. Next step was to leave the bathroom and find a door that now had a red knob. Once I found it, I entered the room. It was my bedroom, but it didn't look that way anymore. My bed and posters were gone. There was just a table with 2 chairs facing each other. One chair was empty, where I was supposed to sit, and the other chair was occupied by a shadowy creature. I took my seat. There was a plate and a large knife sitting in front of me. I waited for my cue. Nail. A voice came from across the table. I took the knife and peeled off my thumbnail and placed it on the plate. The shadowy creature grabbed it and consumed it rapidly. Finger. I continued to offer it the parts of me that it requested and watched it scarf them down. Ear. Eye. And finally, heart. I took the red ribbon out of my pocket and placed it on the plate. The creature grabbed it and guzzled it down. It immediately choked on the thick fabric and fell over on the table. I walked over to it and lifted its head back up and reached inside its mouth. Inside was an eyeball with a red iris. This is when you make your wish. I closed my eyes and wished that Amelie had never gotten in that car accident that totaled her red Jeep, and that she would show up to school tomorrow like it never happened. I turned all the lights back on and thanked the creatures of the dark for helping me. The game was finished. Now I just had to wait and see if anything happened. The next day at school, I saw my friends in our usual hangout spot. My heart was racing as I walked towards them. I was trying not to get my hopes too high, but I just really missed Amelie. The bell rang and we had to head to class. "Everything okay, Lois?" Nicole asked. "You've been really quiet all morning." "I'm fine," I mumbled. This is gonna sound so stupid, but I actually tried that game last night, and I wished that Amelie would show up to school today like everything was back to normal, but I was just being stupid. Nicole just stared at me. Amelie just texted me. She's running a little late. What are you talking about? What game?" My eyes lit up. There's no way. The game had actually worked, but I just told them that I played it. Did I break one of the rules? We heard a crash coming from the parking lot. It was Amelie's red Jeep. In my attempt to save myself some grief, I ended up losing Amelie twice. I don't know how I'm ever going to get over this now. One was scary. I lived in a small town. Like most small towns, it had its fair share of urban legends. The one that fascinated me the most was the legend of Upper and Lower Melinda. Back in the 1800s, when the town was first founded, Melinda was a woman who was accused of being a witch. One day, Melinda's home was broken into by an angry mob of townsfolk. They grabbed her, tied her hands, and dragged her from her house to the center of town, all the while she kicked and screamed, insisting she was innocent. When they reached the gallows, the executioner tied a noose around her neck. "Any last words?" "Yes," she said. "Mark my words. You are making a huge mistake. And as long as the two halves of my body touch, the people of this town will be forever cursed." Shouts erupted from the crowd as Melinda was strung up and took her final breath. Typically in this town, when a woman was hung for being a witch, her body was then cut in half. The town's elders believed this stopped the spread of dark magic that may have prevented the witch from being killed. Terrified of her curse, the townsfolk then buried the two halves of her body far away from each other. The upper half of her body was buried on the edge of town, but her lower half was buried in a secret location unknown to anyone except the person who buried it. Now, about 200 years later, the whereabouts of her lower half are still unknown. Some people believe it's because whenever you visit Upper Melinda's resting place, her lower half crawls closer and closer to it. I wasn't sure if I believed any of this, but I love a good spooky legend. So one fall afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to Upper Melinda to see if there really was a marked grave. I traveled to the old abandoned barn all the way at the edge of town. As soon as I reached the tomb, the clear autumn sky turned dark and gray. The breeze quickly gained speed and swirled around her. And I could have sworn I heard the wind sound like a whisper. "You set me free." Then everything returned to the way it was. I thought it was such a creepy coincidence. The next morning, my alarm didn't go off, so I woke up late. I realized that I had missed my bus, so my mom offered to take me to school. When we got there, we learned that the bus I was supposed to be on was in an accident. Apparently, the bus driver had forgotten to take his insulin that morning and went into shock behind the wheel, causing the bus to crash. Several students were seriously injured, and one was killed. I felt horrible, but also very lucky. And over the next month, strange things kept happening all over town. Car accidents, house fires, power outages. Everyone around me was either getting horribly injured or brutally murdered. But somehow, I was immune to all the bad luck. Then I remembered the night I visited Upper Melinda. The legend. The voice. You set me free. I was the final visit that brought Melinda's two halves back together. And now, everyone in town was cursed, except for me. I should be happy that nothing bad is going to happen to me, but I'm not. I still have to watch my loved ones suffer and die gruesome, unjustified deaths. And that was its own curse.
What?
Relax. I'm sure there's a totally normal, non-lethal explanation for this. Jesus, I'm starving.
Oh man, we haven't eaten all day. You two, rock, paper, scissors to see who we kill and eat.
You can't kill me. I'm the only one who remembers the coordinates to get home.
Damn it, he's right. I wish I hadn't dropped my map.
Hey, maybe this guy knows where we can find some food.
Oh my god, it's a stray.
Well, it's been fun, you guys. I can't lie to you. It actually hasn't.
That's right, I forgot we had a tamed wolf.
Thanks, Mr. Wolf. How can we ever repay you?
Y'all got emeralds? Yeah, but
Give me your emeralds. Hey, I'm a rich-ass wolf. Whoa,
Hey,
it's a fruit.
I'm a rich-ass wolf.
Thank you. We have odds.
yes, but what we don't have is food. Wait a sec. Who wants a fresh cod?
Oh boy, we're gonna have a feast for night. And so they realized that in order for all of them to play together, they were going to need to buy a realm. But none of them had any money, so they were going to have to ask for their mom's credit card to cover the monthly fee. And after they had finally built the ultimate fortress, they found out that one of their little brothers had accessed the world and griefed it!
That's it. I'm not sleeping tonight. As the leader of our group, I too will stay up all night to keep watch of... Good morning.
Ew, we shared a sleeping bag?
I was the big spook. Hey, what happened to all the salmon? There was a big pile right here when we went to bed. Someone must have came along and stole it. Probably those red-eyed rabbits. Stupid albino zombies.
Will you guys relax? I'm sure there's a totally normal, non-lethal explanation for this.
Oh my god, polar bear! Save me before I become pork sausage! This is terrible. This whole situation has just snowballed into a giant mess. That's it! Snowball! Stan, throw that snow! Take that! No! It just made him angrier! Pork chop, jump in the water. What? No, it's cold! And I can't swim! Trust me! Great job, now let's get out of here. Take that, you endangered asshole!